Welcome to Missing Chronicles, where we delve into the heartbreaking and enigmatic mysteries surrounding disappearances. Here, we will immerse ourselves in the world of unsolved cases, thrilling search efforts, and intricate journeys. The goal of this channel is to spread awareness, foster community connections, and provide support to the families and loved ones of the missing. Join me as we embark on a suspenseful journey, hoping to uncover the truth behind these missing chronicles. Help us sustain and grow Missing Chronicles by becoming a patron on Patreon. Your contribution ensures that we can continue our investigations, share compelling stories, and work towards a world where no one is forgotten. Join us in making a lasting impact today. Vanishing Without a Trace, Unraveling the Enigma, a collection of intriguing case studies. I pulled together 3 cases that I think exemplify what I'm talking about. After learning about them, I think you'll probably see what I mean. I strongly recommend you stick around for all 3 as I think the final case is particularly interesting. 62-year-old Greg Monroe drove from his home in Victorville, California, and into the New York mountains within the Mojave National Preserve on October 18, 2013. His plan was to begin deer hunting early the next day and be home by Halloween on October 31st. When Greg didn't make it back by this time, he was reported missing to the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office. On November 3, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office advised National Park staff of the search and rescue near the New York mountains and to be on the lookout for Greg's red 1995 Toyota pickup truck with a camper shell, which was last seen near Pinto Mountain. Greg's truck was found the next day on November 4, exactly where they expected it would be, near Pinto Mountain. His truck and campsite were found as if it had just been set up, with most of his food still there, suggesting that whatever happened to Greg, it happened early in the trip. His truck was locked, and the campsite seemed undisturbed. The search for Greg consisted of up to 70 people, including helicopter crews. Both the sheriff and the NPS participated in the search and scoured the region. The sheriff's spokeswoman described the location like this: "The area is mainly flat, rocky desert with some large mountain peaks and steep grades. The search for Greg Monroe could very easily have ended without success, and today we would say that he vanished without a trace, that his disappearance is mysterious and unexplained." And without knowing what actually happened to Greg, I suppose all of those things would be true. I would encourage you to think about this scenario: Greg Monroe, he arrives in the desert, sets up camp, and almost immediately disappears. The area is open, mostly flat with some rocks and brush. What do you think could have happened to make him disappear in an area like this? I suppose you could say that he walked outside the search area and got lost and died somewhere far away. But I'm sure if Greg was never found, some people would look at this situation and see it as something paranormal, a man who disappeared in the desert where there was nowhere for him to go. Fortunately, we do know what happened to Greg Monroe, and most people would probably never guess what the answer is. On November 7, a searcher from Orange County was scouring the brushland about half a mile from Greg's campsite when they had a very close call. In front of the searcher and completely covered by the heavy brush was a 30-inch by 30-inch hole in the ground. The hole turned out to be a very old well shaft that was forgotten and overgrown by the surrounding brushland. It was later determined that the well was 40 feet deep and half full of water, but at the bottom was the body of Greg Monroe. It appears that Greg was scouting the terrain around his campsite shortly after his arrival in the area. As he wandered around, he fell right into the well shaft that was near impossible to see. Once Greg was in the well, there was no way he could have gotten out. Reports do not mention the official cause of death for Greg, only that his body was found in the well. Truly a sad and tragic accident to happen to anyone, but Greg's story illustrates a point that sometimes the explanation for an unusual disappearance is something that you may not have considered before. Most people who walk around in places like the Mojave National Preserve probably don't think that the next step they take might send them tumbling down a 40-foot well shaft. And looking at the pictures of this shaft, you can see that if searchers had not discovered and cleared the brush from this well, Greg Monroe may never have been found. His name could have been added to the list of disappearances that have no obvious explanation and would probably be added to the list of missing 411 cases. cases such as this are useful to get people thinking outside the box when it comes to explanations for so-called unexplainable missing persons cases. Let's check out the next case. 23-year-old Tatum Morell traveled from her home in Idaho to Montana's Beartooth Mountains. Tatum was an engineering graduate student from Montana State University and also an avid and experienced hiker who was planning to climb 5 mountain peaks in the West Fork of Rock Creek. Though this was Tatum's first trip to the Beartooth Mountains, it was not her first experience with this type of terrain. She backpacked into the area and camped at Shadow Lake on Thursday, July 1, 2021. That same evening, around 8 p.m., she contacted her family via an inReach satellite communicator device to let them know she was okay. This would also be the last time anyone heard from Tatum Morell. Sometime on July 2, Tatum left her campsite and did not return. The search for Tatum began until July 5 and involved multiple search and rescue and law enforcement agencies, dog teams, helicopters, ground searchers, and others. The terrain of the area was very rugged, rocky, and generally difficult to navigate. Tatum's orange and gray tent was found still set up in the Shadow Lake area. Knowing that Tatum was planning to hike up a number of different peaks, searchers focused their efforts on a number of different areas and routes, including Sundance, Bowback Castle, and Whitetail Mountains. At night, helicopters used infrared cameras to try and spot her. Despite the use of significant resources and manpower, searchers were unable to find any trace of Tatum Morell in the area. Now quite a few people may remember this case because it was well publicized at the time. I remember this case because as it was happening, as there were searchers still on the ground, I was receiving emails from people asking me to cover this case for numerous reasons. Among them was that it was a missing 411 case currently happening right before our eyes, that her disappearance was clearly paranormal, and that Bigfoot may have been somehow involved. It really has been the only time I was inundated with so many emails regarding a current case. Now as a rule, I generally try to stay away from cases that are so fresh there are still searchers on the ground. There is simply too much uncertainty at that point. We don't have enough information, search and rescue hasn't finished doing their job. The sheriff may or may not be investigating. In Tatum Morell's case, the search turned up nothing, but almost 2 months later, in late August, a group of hikers were in the area of Whitetail Peak when they came across some hiking gear. Shortly thereafter, they discovered a boot sticking out from the rocky mountainside. Now they were aware that there had recently been a search and rescue in the area, so they used a satellite device to contact authorities immediately. They had discovered the body of Tatum Morell. She was located in an area that had been searched many times before, but the problem was that she was almost entirely buried by rocks. It appears that Tatum had been attempting to climb Whitetail Peak sometime on July 2 when a rock slide occurred, burying her and also taking her life. Because she was covered up in the rock slide, searchers were unable to see her as they scoured the area. Tatum's remains were then airlifted out of the area, and her case was subsequently closed. Like all cases of this nature, it is an absolute tragedy, but also something to learn from. This was a situation where search and rescue probably walked very close to Tatum's actual location. This was also a situation where search dogs were unable to track her scent. Searchers of both the human and canine variety are fallible, and there is likely nothing more they could have done in this situation. But if Tatum Morell had never been found, I am certain some people would be saying that the failure of these searchers to turn up any shred of evidence or the failure of these canines to track any scent must be because something paranormal occurred, when in fact it was all due to a tragic rock slide. Now shifting gears real quick, I want to briefly mention a completely different case. A few months ago, I had a couple of emails regarding the disappearance of actor Julian Sands in Mount Baldy, California. This disappearance was well publicized, likely due to Mr. Sands' status as an actor, but still to this day, Julian Sands has not been found. It should be noted that evidence of avalanches was seen in the area of Mount Baldy, and the entire search area was temporarily closed due to the threat of avalanches. Why do I bring this case up? Because avalanches and rock slides are real threats that hikers and climbers face. When someone disappears without a trace on a mountainside like Mr. Sands did, the most likely explanation is probably that he was buried by an avalanche. Can we be certain of this? No, we won't know for certain unless he is found one day. But cases like that of Tatum Morrell show us how these events can completely stifle search efforts. Is that also what occurred in the case of Julian Sands? It's certainly a possibility, and at this time, it seems like the most likely one as well. Now let's take a look at one more case. 39-year-old Raymond Jones lived in Salmon, Idaho, where he owned a service station and dairy products distributorship. Raymond was known as an avid hunter and outdoorsman, someone who could take care of himself if he was ever lost. On September 7, 1968, Raymond, along with two other hunter friends, Ralph Pearson and Dale Baird, was out bow hunting in the Hayden Creek area, some 30 miles southeast of Salmon. The group were in the area looking for deer, elk, and bighorn sheep. At about 1:30 p.m. on Saturday, the group split up, and Raymond was last seen hiking up the ridge that separates the East Fork of Hayden Creek with the Tobias drainage. Raymond was last seen wearing camouflage clothing, brown boots, and a brown hat. He also carried a camouflage bow, and his face was painted to act as camouflage. Raymond's hunting companions would report him missing early on September 8. The Lemhi County Sheriff, Bill Baker, would arrive in the area by the late afternoon. The official search began shortly thereafter and involved nearly 100 volunteers and searchers, dog teams, and airplanes. During the search, nothing of value was found. One day, searchers discovered a trail of blood drops and also heard a gunshot, but their origin was never determined. The search was also plagued by bad weather and conditions, with at least one heavy rainstorm hitting the area. The Lemhi County Sheriff's Office terminated their involvement in the search by September 12 after the search had turned up absolutely no clues. Sheriff Baker would tell newspapers that he believed Raymond was dead and was quoted saying, "I don't think there's a piece of ground up there that hasn't been flown over 10 times or walked over once or twice." The sheriff believed that Raymond may have fallen on one of his own arrows or been buried by a rock slide. While noting they had noticed several fresh slides in the area, still, about 70 volunteers remained in the mountains afterwards, and one helicopter continued the aerial search. Raymond had two brothers who joined the search and were also adamant about continuing the search on their own. It wouldn't take long before the search for Raymond was restarted after the discovery of footprints on a ridge between Hayden Creek and the Posomaroy Valley. On September 13, a district forest ranger would tell newspapers that the tracks were found in an area that was not previously searched. The ranger also indicated that tracking dogs were to be flown in as the search resumed. The renewed search efforts proved futile as nothing was found that led to Raymond's location. By September 17, about a week and a half into the search, only 2 deputies and 2 dogs remained in the search area. In October, Raymond's family would place a notice in the newspapers thanking everyone who volunteered and assisted in the search. Afterwards, search attempts seemed to have petered out, and the disappearance of Raymond Jones seemed like it would remain unsolved forever. Years after Raymond's disappearance, his widow, Donna Jones, would have Raymond declared deceased via the Lemhi County Courts. 53 years would pass when on September 17, 2021, the Lemhi County Sheriff was informed of a report of found human remains in the East Fork of Hayden Creek. A deputy subsequently made contact with the reporting party, Christopher Williams, via a cell phone call. At the time, Mr. Williams was still in the area where he had found the remains. Mr. Williams stated that he was bow hunting in the area of Hayden Creek when he decided to take a shortcut from one hunting area to another and happened upon a boot that appeared to have a foot bone still contained within it. Mr. Williams then began to look around the area some more and came across a skull and a femur bone as well. He then found a broken arrow and a bow, both of which were very old and weathered. The Lemhi County Sheriff's Office, along with the Lemhi County Coroner, responded to the area and collected the remains and other items found at the scene. The remains were then sent to the Ada County Coroner's Office for identification. On October 5, 2021, the Ada County Coroner's Office confirmed that the remains were those of Raymond Jones. The cause of death was not determined due to the condition of the remains. The case of Raymond Jones is a good example of how someone can disappear without a trace and remain missing for decades. It's also a good example of how someone can be found decades later. In this case, Raymond was found by a hunter who was not even looking for him. This is not an uncommon occurrence. There have been many cases where missing persons have been found by hunters, hikers, or other people who were not specifically looking for them. In conclusion, when we hear about cases of people who have vanished without a trace, it's important to remember that there are often logical explanations for these disappearances. Sometimes, these explanations are not immediately apparent, and it may take years or even decades for the truth to come to light. But in the end, the most likely explanation is usually the correct one. Thank you for watching Missing Chronicles. We have explored captivating stories and searched for answers behind the vanished. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated with our latest videos. Share these videos to spread the message and assist affected families and loved ones. If you have any information related to the cases we've discussed, please leave them in the comments section. Together, we can make a difference. See you in the next Missing Chronicles.